everyone. My name is Lucia Dragos, and I'm a supervising producer at Queens Public Television. Welcome to Queens Conversations. I'm joined today by my two colleagues, John Collins and Noran Omar. And today's topic is COVID and our community, undocumented and unprotected. Our guests are Councilmember Danielle Dromm, District 25, State Senator Jessica Ramos, New York Senate District 13. We have Danielle Ellman, the CEO of Common Point Queens. And we have as well Erick, who is a member of the Elmhurst community. Going back to rent, a lot of undocumented families are struggling to pay rent. Are there any programs in place to help them avoid eviction since they're undocumented?
Well, that's why I said we need legal services. You know, we do provide assistance to low-income people to help them if they have to go into housing court. But it's not nearly enough for what the demand was pre-COVID. And now after COVID, we're going to have other people coming in who need that type of defense. So there's really very little that can be done, particularly for those who are undocumented. The mayor secured about $20 million from private organizations, but that money went so quick that many people were left out of that program. As you know, many of the federal programs are not available to the undocumented community. We've been working with Met Council as well, because Met Council on occasion will offer one-time payments for rent, but provided that people can continue to pay the payments afterwards. So there is a provision there that people have a job and that they're going to be able to keep up with the rent moving forward. And the rent is mostly a state issue. So the city's budgeting toward that is not as much as the state really is responsible for than the city. So maybe Danielle wants to comment more on the rent situation.
Yeah, I think so. Similar to Met Council, we also have a cash assistance program where we can provide people with a month. I mean, depending on the range of their rent, a month to 2 months of rent relief. But very much like Councilmember Dromm stated, the loophole of that, or the challenge of that, especially in this moment in time, is that there has to be a plan in place. That this is almost like I fell behind because X happened to me, and now I know how to keep myself moving forward. So it's really it's an amazing tool and it works, but it's a very discreet tool. I think very similar to what the council member is saying is, you know, we're working really closely with New York Legal Assistance Group to educate people about what their rights are. I think undocumented community members are terrified to make themselves known. And so doing shows like this and trying to raise awareness to community-based organizations such as myself that are looking to support undocumented immigrants typically only happens through word of mouth, right? So it's only when an undocumented immigrant recognizes that a community-based organization can help and that they stay safe, will they then tell their friends about it. And so I think, you know, on emergency needs such as food, such as immediate cash assistance, such as some rent relief, there has to first be the trust. And that's, I think, one of the challenges, Lucia, that you're pointing out, and that your friends don't even know who to call or how to help. And I definitely think council members' offices are a great first step. Community-based organizations such as mine are a great first step. We don't overpromise and underdeliver. We let you know what we can do and what we can't do. We also, you know, there's mixed family status community members, which are really almost an interesting group, because there's oftentimes, especially in Corona and Elmhurst, undocumented parents whose children have citizenship, and then there's different resources that we can provide those families. And so really, case by case, there's lots of different ways that community-based organizations can help. Not at all it's a drop in the bucket, and I think that as a city, we have to do more, and none of us should go to sleep at night knowing that we have 20 block lines and thousands of people lining up all over Queens, hungry in New York City. That should always be an unacceptable fact to us. And immigration status shouldn't matter if your stomach is rumbling. And we all, as community and citizens of this city and this country, need to raise our voices on these issues, because we're doing a lot, but we're not doing enough.
Can I add to that also? One of the complications here has been the Trump ruling on the public charge. And people, especially the undocumented, obviously, are terrified of being found out through either they think getting SNAP benefits or other types of benefits, because they don't want to be accused of becoming a public charge, quote unquote. There are some ways around it. Danielle mentioned if your children are American born, that's one way around it. But the whole campaign around the public charge has made a lot of undocumented people very hesitant to come in and ask for help, even though sometimes help is available to them. So, you know, anytime they come into a council member's office, or if they go to Common Point, or if they go somewhere else, the information that they give us is held confidential. They do not have to worry. They can come in and talk to us. Even though I am part of the government, we keep everything confidential. I'm not even allowed to discuss it really with other staff members if somebody tells me something. So, you know, we really urge people to come in and take advantage of the government offices as well.
I just unmuted Eric. I wanted to ask him, what help you wish you had from the government?
What I wish, whatever I wish is, you know, it's hard to get it, because, you know, first of all, because I'm live here for almost 13 years, and, you know, we always hear, you know, about the new good things for the country, for the immigrant people, but, you know, we don't see nothing good for, you know, for all the immigrant, you know, people. And we work, you know, we work hard all the time, you know, to do the best, yeah, you know, but with this pandemic, you know, a lot of people, you know, is afraid to go out and lose the job, and we're hungry, you know. I hear they say we're hungry in Queens, you know, but we really need help. But we only hear, you know, they helping some people, but to be honest, we never get nothing, you know. And
do you have regrets coming to the States?
I'm sorry?
Do you have regrets coming to the States?
Maybe in the future, you know. But now, you know, because the life here is very expensive, you know, and especially without job, we have to pay the bills and the rent, and, you know, whatever the saving I had was almost done. You know, that's one day I tell my girlfriend, you know, we cannot wait here until we finish the all money, you know. That way, you know, we have to stay here. We're hungry, and, you know, and especially my son is coming, you know, my baby son is coming 2 months. So I tell her we're going to move to Las Vegas and then maybe get something better there. Yeah. But it's hard. It's very hard to get help here in New York. You know, I know they help, a lot of help in the hospital, but it's not enough to, you know, for all people.
None of us expected the drastic impact that this pandemic would produce, especially on our traditional support services. What new developments have you created to help fight the isolation, to bring a community together in terms of, well, social distancing?
So, I mean, it's definitely been challenging to think those things through. I think that, like many organizations, we pivoted really quickly to the virtual space to see what we could make happen in the virtual space. So exercise, community events, speaker series, things like that occur in the virtual space. And I think that we've done really well in engaging Queens community members. We hosted some drive-in movies. We were able to finally in July open up. We have 2 outdoor pool clubs. We were able to get our outdoor pools open and really rethink, you know, distance and large spaces and how we use it. We are significant providers in the Borough of Queens of geriatric mental health, and we've been able to pivot to mental health services through telehealth, which I think has been important. I'm really concerned about our older adults in Queens. I know that's not the topic of today, but they're still home and they're terrified and they're scared and their resources are limited. And, as we see in different states where the cases are climbing, they're really affecting the younger populations who are coming out and congregating. And I think the more that the news tells those stories, the more that the older adults of New York City are going to stay home. And so I really worry about isolation and depression and lots of the things. And so we're constantly, I know I kind of shifted a little bit, but we're constantly thinking about ways that we can creatively bring community together. So at a time where we all feel so isolated, maybe we can do a little bit to chip away at that.
There's a question from a viewer, and this is for Councilman Dromm. How do you plan on dealing with upcoming across-the-board budget shortfalls, and how do you communicate this with your constituents?
Well, I think one of the things that we were hoping for in this budget, because if we don't get federal aid, we're going to see even rougher or harder times moving forward. But we were really hoping that we will see additional federal help. Without the federal help, there could be layoffs moving forward, which would put the city back to the way that it was like in the 1970s. So our big hope right now is that federal assistance will come through, and people should be contacting their federal elected officials, their Congress members, Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, to really make sure that this package in Washington, this next package, which has been somewhat promised, although the Republicans are not really responding, but we desperately, desperately need that funding in order to keep the levels the way they are, even just with the cuts we had to make recently. So we're in very difficult times at this point, very difficult.
The pandemic is far from over. How would you assess your organization's response and the response of your staff? How are they getting on?
It is far from over. And I think that one of the biggest challenges of this, I think different than any kind of natural disaster or any kind of other emergency we faced, is I think the impact happens and then you rebuild. And what's happened here is this prolonged state of uncertainty. And so how do you plan around the uncertainty has been a real challenge, because we've had to get used to, this is today's answer and tomorrow the answer could be different. So, again, big preschool provider, big provider of out of school time services. We run employment programs for young people as well as adults. What is that going to all look like in the fall? I probably spend 10 hours a day in meetings trying to figure that out. And I could tell you 50 different versions of what we're thinking. I think technology and the use of technology is here to stay. And I think there's inefficiencies that we've created in some of our programs, utilizing technologies in ways that I would have definitely been skeptical prior to this. And I think that my staff represents Queens community members, right? We're a not-for-profit. We're all middle-class Queens residents who are struggling every day with our own emotional anxiety about what is going on in this borough. I think more thinking back to March and April, asking those community members to not only come into work, but come into contact with children who are connected to essential workers who were high risk carriers of coronavirus was a challenge. And I think that my staff really rose to that challenge and said, this is the new and now evolving need of community, and we as an agency are here to meet it. I think that when we all of a sudden became a massive Meals on Wheels program, which we weren't prior to this, and we had 65 cars going out every single day, and I was shoving packages into my back seat with my son and my daughter delivering all throughout the borough, we knew that this was the new normal and that we as an agency had to respond because this was our moment to respond, and we couldn't shutter our windows and stand by and watch. That's just not the makeup of this agency. So I am here today, tomorrow, and forever with enormous pride in what we've done. And I'm super proud of the relationships that we have with our local council members and our local elected officials who have delivered food with us, who have done anything that we've asked to raise the issues. And I just beg us all to keep having these conversations, because we are not, I wouldn't even say we're halfway done.
With a reduction in funding and perhaps staff cuts that may have been necessary, do you see yourself as remaining sustainable and relevant in the future? How would you do that?
I do. I see myself sustainable and relevant. So, you know, as a not-for-profit in this borough, we, prior to the pandemic, we're operating in about 55 locations. We're on the bigger side. And our funding was really diversified. So we're funded by all three levels of government. We have fee-for-service programming, and we have private foundations. And so the game, because it's kind of like a puzzle board, is how do you keep this balanced and continue? And yes, you've had to sunset some hard programs. I don't think that any of us ever thought that in August or September, our gyms wouldn't be back open and in service. Our indoor pools would still be out of commission. A lot of the fee generating programs that we run are not back up and running. I don't know what our preschools are gonna look like yet for the fall. And what I mean by that is not that we're not planning for them, but we can't plan for what will happen as community comes back outside. And if people get sick again, will we have to close our schools down again? And what will that mean for our agency? And so we're a little bit leaner. It was a really hard, like the council member, it wasn't easy to pass our budget for July 1 either. And we're definitely smaller than we were, but we're fierce and we're mighty, and we are going to continue to meet the evolving needs of Queens. We are not going anywhere anytime soon.
And they do a fantastic job. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Oh, yep.
You too. We're very lucky in Queens. We have the best elected officials,
Wow.
we have amazing partners in agency and community-based organizations. This is a really special place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One last question to Councilman Dromm. So what do you think it's one thing or few things that the community needs to get back on their feet faster?
I think Danielle and Senator Ramos both alluded to the fact that if schools are not open, if pre-Ks are not open, if we don't have childcare, I don't know how we can get back to normal, because parents won't be able to work and they're desperate for those types of services. So we do need to plan and to get an understanding of what that's going to look like in the fall. Now, the governor said he's going to make a decision August 1st. The mayor is saying he's going to make a decision September 1st. But by that time, parents are going to need to know what they're going to do in the fall with their children. So I think that that's something that really needs to be looked at and moved forward before we can do much of anything else at this point, to be honest with you. It's true for my own staff. What happens when kids are not in school, quote unquote, you know, and they're doing remote learning? Difficult, very, very difficult situation.
Danielle, what programs do you have to help the children of, let's say, our undocumented families?
Children of undocumented families. I think, again, it's really a case by case. We provide childcare to any student. We provide services to really anybody in terms of resources. I don't want to overstate, because it's ultimately a case by case and really depends on the status of the child, which often is a moving variable versus the status of the parent. But on emergency needs, we will do anything to support families. And really, I think a big piece of it is to create some level of comfort in how they go through systems that are really complex to know their rights and get the resources that they need into.
Many
Yeah.
of the parents are forced to go to work and
Yeah.
helps with childcare and whatever.
And I think that, again, the health and safety of everybody is definitely the primary driving force of all decisions. But I think that, like Councilmember Dromm said, there has to be respect to the planning and the needs of families to figure out what they're going to do. And who does that affect the most? The hourly wage workers. So if I'm an hourly wage worker and I don't have leave and paid time off and things like that, and I don't know what my child's school will be, and at best I'm going back part-time, well, how am I going back to work? And agencies such as mine, if we don't have funding to provide free services, how are we charging people who are literally at the most neediest moment in time for the resources so that they can then return to work? It's a vicious cycle. And without a real plan from the mayor about what that 100, I don't mean to air quote it obnoxiously, but what the 100,000 slots mean, none of us can plan what September looks like to be able to get out there into community and say, don't worry, we have you covered, because we don't know yet that we're covered. And I think that while we need to be nimble and flexible, and maybe September might look different than what we're planning, I think that there is a responsibility to have a plan, and it is a really tough environment to be sitting in without a plan right now.
Thank you. I think that's, let me just check the questions, and I think that's all for today. Unless, yeah, there are no more questions. I think Nora, yeah, Nora.
So the youth recently in Queens, there was a big issue about all the youth getting out and not being careful during COVID and this pandemic. So I know you were saying, Danielle, that you guys are offering drive-ins and drive-throughs to get them involved. How can they reach out? How can they figure out these events, and how can they stay safer?
Sure. And you know what? That's an awesome question, because one of the places in June where I was like going like this as a crazy lady is the more that, and you know, initially camps weren't going to be open this summer. We ultimately got summer youth employment back. So we're in the process of enrolling about 3,000 Queens kids right now into virtual employment opportunities, which is amazing. But the more that we shut things down and we don't regulate how community can come together, the worse this is. So I don't want to overstate my running love, but every now and then I run in Cunningham Park.